am I going to put 2 weeks of adventure for my child?
The point is not for him to go in the woods and be comfortable. We're helping kids discover who they are. It is not just about going out and canoeing or paddling or whatever it is. What we're trying to do is education.
Ginger Naylor is the CEO of Outward Bound USA, guiding its national network and educational mission.
She previously led the Chesapeake Bay Outward Bound School and has over 20 years of nonprofit leadership.
Focused on expanding access to outdoor and community programs.
How have you consciously thought about sort of kind of managing these changes in our awareness of wilderness spaces?
For many of them, it is the first time they have ever seen the horizon over water.
More parents are trying to create opportunities for their kids to get away from technology.
We're on technology right now. It's important. It's not going anywhere. But I think we've got to rebalance how we interact with it.
Ginger, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Hi, friends. It's so good to see you. It's so good to chat. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And as you know, Kelly and I consider ourselves at the very root outdoors people.
That's a really nice word. I was going to say dirtbags.
Dirtbags.
Who've slept in more BLM parking lots than anyone else.
Yeah. We just so you know, we have a lot of people, I don't know what they want to do when they retire, but we actually always want to get back to our roots where we can like be living in a vehicle again.
Plus health insurance.
We'd like to have health insurance and vehicle living.
That's the dream.
So we are just delighted to have you here. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about your backstory and how you got to this amazing role being the first female CEO of Outward Bound. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And tell me a little, it's pretty historic. And I'd love to know a little bit about your journey leading you, whatever parts of your journey sort of led you and prepared you to this role. And not only that, but like the symbolism of the role, because I do think in an organization like this that's been not going for so many years, to have the first female CEO in 2022 is also symbolically significant.
It definitely is. So I didn't take the traditional adventure route that a lot of people do when they get in this role, right? They find themselves in some sort of an outdoor adventure job or hobby that leads them into work and then leads them up the chain somehow or another. For me, I grew up an outdoor kid. I often joke that I grew up a feral kid, and my mom doesn't like that, so I don't say that as much anymore, but I did. I grew up one of those kids that, I'm a Gen Xer, and we went outside first thing in the morning. We drank out of the hose. We had pitchers of Kool-Aid out on the picnic table, right? And we had a lot of freedom, which I really loved. And when I moved to a major city and began having children of my own, I really started looking for the community of people where my kids could have that same kind of upbringing. And it's hard. It's challenging. We're fighting devices that my parents didn't have to deal with, right? There's a lot of distractions that parents are dealing with now. And my boys are in their 20s. And so I got them through those critical periods. But when they were little, it was really hard. It was really hard trying to figure out, how do I get them outside? How do I keep them active? How do I keep them off the couch and off of the screens? And where do I find a community of people that are doing that? And so through luck, I sort of stumbled into Outward Bound. I was sitting on a board and we did a team building day for our board, which was transformational. We used the outdoors of the classroom. And so as soon as I stepped foot on that place and started looking around and talking to people on the campus, I just knew. I was like, these are my people. These are the people. This is the community that I've been looking for.
We feel that the wilderness or exposure to the outdoors in all of its permutations oftentimes either comes from you have parents who do it, or maybe you stumble into a program that through high school or some of the outdoor recreation, if you happen to go to university, those clubs are hugely important. But something you hinted at is that oftentimes wilderness or outdoors or wild isn't just easily part of the lexicon of the typical person. They don't even know that it's missing. And let me give you an example. My daughter Caroline, who is an Outward Bound grad, and I were at a school visiting for a water polo recruiting trip. And the kids, there were maybe 15 or 20 kids around the table, like all college superstars, and not a single one had slept in a tent, and not a single one had slept outside. I'm just talking about in the backyard. and they had to do it as part of a build team building experience, and they were really freaked out by the notion just sleeping under the stars. And they turned to Caroline and they're like, "Well, have you ever slept outside?" And she's like, "Well, yeah." And it was very clear that the reason that Caroline had valued these things was that her parents just drug her in, and there was a model for it. There's not a model. How do you discover? Is it just your experience, in this board experience where you're like, "Oh, this is the missing piece"? Because it's pretty crazy that you go from there to, the queen of one of the most important and valiant
Gonna put that in
organizations
my
in the
signature
world
line
right now.
now, thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it, right? We're as humans, we do what we grew up seeing. You repeat those patterns, you learn. Your parents are your role models, and if they are not outdoor people, if they're not going and doing that,
Mhm.
like as a kid, you're just not going to be familiar with it. And again, as humans, anything unfamiliar needs an introduction. It needs a way into it, right? And so I think we've got a lot of folks, and Julia, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but like there's a lot of folks that have been either by function of where they live, they're in a city, right? So they just don't have nearby wilderness outdoors. It doesn't feel safe for some reason or another. It could be the upbringing. I mean, lots of African American communities talk a lot about like the outdoors has just historically never been a safe place for us. And so venturing
Sure.
out there still carries the weight of everything they heard from their parents all the way along, through childhood, that it's a place to be feared. So there's a lot of work to overcome that. Children are incredibly resilient. And by their nature, by design, they love adventure. So the easiest way that I've found, and this is what we do at Outward Bound, right, is this is an adventure. Like you can't lose that sense of excitement and the unknown and exploration and all of those things that make it exciting. So you can balance out the fear and the unknown, but the trick is really giving people entry points to find the outdoors. Um, I have 4 boys and, I was just thinking about you saying that some of your daughter's classmates had never slept outside. Like, my kids are probably like your kids, right? They have done it since they were tiny. They're outdoors. They're so comfortable being outdoors all the time, and those kids often end up becoming great ambassadors for bringing other kids along and saying, "Hey, this can actually be really fun. This isn't as scary as you think it is, or it's not, you know, big and burly." I mean, half the time it all comes down to gear, right?
Yeah, right? Oh my god. So, I would just love to take a pause to actually have you tell our audience what Outward Bound is,
Mhm.
because again, since Kelly and I were guides and grew up camping and hiking and doing all the things in our with our families, and of course our daughter has attended an Outward Bound course, we are very
Yay.
familiar with Outward Bound, fans of the organization and understand what the mission is. But if you could really sort of explain it to someone who, maybe has heard of it, but, doesn't really know what it's about and, what the goals are and, anything you can tell us about the organization.
Yep. So Outward Bound was founded in the 40s, which I'm not going to give you a big, deep, boring history lesson, but essentially it was founded on the idea that resilience makes better soldiers. So there's a long, amazing story that someone can Google about World War One, and old guys were dying, and young guys were dying, and the old guys were surviving in war.
Mm.
And they looked at it and they were like, why is that happening? And it came down to resilience, right? The old guys had been there, done that. They were a little more resilient. They were able to say, yep, if I just hang on, if I have the mental toughness, if I have the physical, desire to, I can survive this. And so that led to a program that has been adopted over the last 60 years to try to figure out, how do you unpack that? How do you actually create resiliency in people? How do you create people that can bounce back when something hard happens, that have the, emotional capacity and stretch to be able to do that? The outdoors is a fabulous foil for that. So from the 40s all the way up through the 2000s, the curriculum was refined, studied ad nauseum. I mean, there's so much research out there about how you do this. And it became what Outward Bound is today. So that original program was called Outward Bound, but it has evolved tremendously from the 1940s World War II era to what we see today. And what that looks like is kids coming to us. Their parents are usually signing them up, or their school is signing them up, and what the goal is to try to develop the character of who that person is. So we're not about survival skills. We're not about how do you tie the knot or how do you, rig up a climb. Those aren't the things we do those things, but the goal is that we're helping kids discover who they are. We discover how helping them discover how much they're actually capable of and that they walk out of our programs feeling really confident and also feeling like, yeah, I can shrug off the bad grades or the divorce my parents are going through or whatever and I can find a way to persevere and achieve what I'm looking to achieve in my life. So we do that through a pretty standard curriculum where we take kids, mostly kids, some adults, but we take kids on wilderness adventures because there is no classroom as good as the wilderness. Like, if you want to make somebody uncomfortable, the wilderness will always do it, even for the most seasoned of us who have every ounce of gear, all the skills. The wilderness can still rain on you when you weren't ready for it, give you wet socks, whatever it is, give you a challenge that you have to push through. And so that's part of why we choose the outdoors as a way to teach.
As I was reading more about the organization for this interview, I kept seeing this phrase called threshold moments.
Mhm.
Um, and it just seemed to be something I read. So can you talk about what that is? And, is that something that the instructors in these courses are trying to create, or do they just happen because as sort of a side effect of the experience?
Both has been my experience. So threshold moment is exactly what it sounds like, right? Like it is the point where you have hit the edge of your comfort zone and you're like, how do you move outside of that? Because that's where all the growth, all that learning really happens, right? We want to get them over the threshold and out into that growth area. I think it's interesting because it depends on the group of people. I mean, humans are humans, right? Sometimes you get a group of kids and just getting them out on the trail for 2 days is going to stretch them to where they're uncomfortable. Or we work with the US Naval Academy, for example, and you have midshipmen. That's an entirely different situation, right? They have their threshold is farther than your average eighth grader, is a good way to say it. And I've often heard instructors say, well, we need the third instructor to show up now. And the third instructor is always the rain. So they're like
The rain.
Yep, like, when the third instructor shows up, it's the rain. That's the one that's really gonna teach you something. Um, so, yeah, depending on what's going on with the group dynamics, our instructors are incredible. They are 100% the heart of this organization, and the way that they are able to facilitate groups of people through a learning process that is really about self-discovery and stretching who you think you are and what you're capable of. It's amazing. I mean, you all probably have had that same experience. It's just incredible to watch them work and see a group and say, "Yep, this one needs more. Let's put more miles on. Let's go a little harder. Let's, you know, prompt them with a question that will challenge them," whatever it is.
I love that. I think one of the things, you know, again, just having been, a Boy Scout, I grew up in Europe, we were feral is the greatest word ever. I had to be home by the sixth or seventh church bell at
Right?
the local Catholic church there
Yeah.
in Bavaria. And we were wild. We carried all the things we needed in our pack every day because we knew it was going to rain. I think we all had knives because obviously it was Southern Germany and I was probably 10. So that made total sense.
Some
Um,
things haven't changed.
that's right. One of the things that I love about the experience, and I think anyone listening can hear this, is that as you said, you don't have to fake the experience, the hardship. It's difficult. You're going to be tired. You're going to have to, Caroline describes a really challenging individual on her trip that she had to bring along and include, and that kid was as important as anyone else. And, but simultaneously, what I love is that you don't have to be very meta about it. Just come and walk and carry your own
So
pack and cook and clean for everyone. But simultaneously, you are very formal about the reflection drills. Is that I mean, obviously a very intentional piece, but I have to believe that if we just said do the experience, we might miss out on being aware of that change. Can you just talk a little bit more about sort of that process? And you just hinted at it a little
well,
bit.
so we call that transference, and that is something we train our instructors on, and we're very intentional about because you could have an experience that has no meaning. and that's not the point, right? So
Mm.
the meaning making of this hill you just climbed this mountain and you summited. There are all sorts of lessons that a good facilitator can pull out. And so I think of, questions like, so that was really hard for you. What do you think made it hard? What could you do differently where it wouldn't be as hard? And so you start to pull them into this reflection and group conversation where they all have these ahas. Even when they do team challenges, I always love the like, what could make that easier? And in my head, I'm like, communication, communication. Come on, y'all, if you just talk to each other, But then they all say, like, oh, wow, if we communicated better and we gave more feedback to each other, we would have been more successful or faster. Um, I mean, I think that is one of the key pieces of what Outward Bound does. It is not just about going out and canoeing or paddling or whatever it is. Those activities, that's recreation, right? What we're trying to do is education and think about how do you help this person learn something from this experience and make meaning out of it.
So we've had a lot of guests on our podcast, and I'm sure it's because we really value this as a family and as a couple who've talked about the importance of creating discomfort in your
Mhm.
life as a resilience builder. We had Michael Easter, author of The Comfort Crisis, on. We've had Joe DeSena, the founder of the Spartan Race, and many other guests who have really said that, in this world of air conditioning and cars and technology, that it is so easy to just get too comfortable and that we really do need to practice discomfort, which is probably sort of the sort of root of resilience training. um is that sort of a value or a lesson that Outward Bound is consciously trying to teach in the education, or do you think that's just a side effect of the kind of programming these kids are doing?
No, I mean, that's at the heart of what we're doing. I can remember being the executive director of a school, and a mom of a boy came in. He was like, I don't know, 6'5" and 220 pounds or something. Like, this was not a small kid, right? He was a big football player looking guy. And he came in with her and they sat down and she said, well, my son really, I don't want him to be uncomfortable. I want to buy him some food. I want to buy him extra food. I want to buy him an extra sleeping pad. I want to like make this easier. She was trying to figure out everything she could do to make it easier for him. And he was sitting sort of behind her and I looked at him, I said, "Are these your worries?" And he goes, "No, it's her." And it was mom that was trying to like smooth the way. And that's what moms do, right? I do that for my boys too. I catch myself all the time, like making things easier. But I got to have a good conversation with her and say, like, "You're missing the point. The point is not for him to go in the woods and be comfortable. We're trying to help him get really cozy with being uncomfortable, right? He's going to have times where working with a team is going to be hard. And that's just like real life. You're going to get in a job and you're going to have a crappy coworker that's not fun to work with and they're complaining and whining, and you still got to get the job done." So it could be that emotional discomfort where you're just like, "I'm out of my element. I don't know what to do. And how do I deal with that? How do I sit with it?"
Mm.
It could be physical discomfort that you push through, although we try not to, we're not going for that as much. But certainly, if you hike 10 miles up a mountain in a day, at the end of it, you're going to be exhausted. You're also going to feel like you really accomplished something, which is so good for teenagers. So, I mean, the resiliency part of it, the way you develop that is by stretching something, because once it's stretched, your mind, probably the same thing with muscles. I don't know. But once you stretch it, it just doesn't go back to the same place. So that's what we're trying to do is just expand where you're comfortable, what you can handle.
I think probably the people listening to this are largely Gen Xers. Um,
Yay for us.
we came I mean, if you get into my Instagram, it's like inflatable tents to the wilderness, people building shelters. I mean, like the
Yeah, that's
outdoor.
our latest obsession, by the way, is these inflatable tents, and people are adding actual fireplaces to them, and then they go camping in the snow. Now that we've said this to you, you're gonna start seeing this
Of course.
everywhere, but yeah, that's our latest obsession.
We I have to believe that I want to say sort of peak wilderness awareness has to be sort of the 80s. The wilderness is sexy, it's unknown, it's starting to be marketed. I mean, Camel cigarettes is in there, Bacardi's in there, like this lifestyle wilderness piece. now, as you hinted at, we're sort of really competing with modernity, right? All of the tech. How has Outward Bound, because we are realizing, of course, now with this science catching up, that wilderness, outdoor time, far gazing, sunlight, all these things are so crucial. How has you seen this waxing and waning of awareness? And I don't mean to make this political, but certainly in this moment now where some of our wild spaces are being considered to be utilized as resources again, it seems like we have to get people to have these experiences in order to even value those things. Otherwise, it's just, what is the Alaskan wilderness? It's not even relevant to me because I have no even entree in except for a movie I saw. So we just talk about, does is Outward Bound aware of these shifting trends, and how have you consciously thought about sort of kind of managing these changes in our awareness of wilderness spaces?
So I think there's two parts to that question. One regarding wilderness. In my career, my favorite other nonprofit partners, besides youth serving ones, are conservation organizations. And what I always say to them is like, we need each other. I can get kids to love it, and I need them to save it. They need to save it so that we can take kids out on it and so that they will love it, right? Like, we are so symbiotic in our needs. And I've seen it real time. I live here in Maryland on the east coast of the US on the Chesapeake Bay, and Outward Bound here takes kids sea kayaking. For many of them, it is the first time they have ever seen the horizon over water because they've been living in cities. It's first time they see a river wake up. If you've ever seen a river wake up in the morning when the birds start singing and the owls come out and the otters are fluttering around, right? Like, it is stunningly beautiful. It feels like a religious experience. And watching youth, watching kids, watching adults have that experience, you can literally see the change start to happen in them. Besides that their nervous system dramatically calms down, right? Um, they have this appreciation and they walk away from those courses saying, this is valuable. This place where nothing is built, nothing exists, is really valuable to me as a human. And then they become advocates for the outdoors. And that means for wilderness spaces, that means for nearby wilderness, play parks, all of those things. So it's not an official stance of Outward Bound, but I think if you talk to any Outward Bounder in our system, we would all say that we feel very close to the conservation effort because it's so important for what we end up doing. And I just blanked on the second part of that. You had a second
That's good.
follow-up to
Well,
that question, I think.
no, yeah,
Sorry, well,
yeah.
I've got it, but
I should
go
have had a
ahead,
new
pivot, Jen.
notepad
No,
here
no.
with me.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, that was great. So one thing before we move on from sort of the nuts and bolts of what Outward Bound is, one of the hallmarks of I think most Outward Bound courses, if I'm not mistaken, is something called the
I
solo.
knew you were gonna ask about that.
Yeah,
Heck
and I
yeah.
figure everybody does. And I will be honest, I've been familiar with the solo ever since I first learned about Outward Bound, probably in high school. And as a mom, when I signed my own daughter up for an Outward Bound course, I decided just not to tell her about the solo because
Good
I
move,
felt
mom, good
like
move.
that it would get in her heads. She's a very experienced outdoors kid, so that part of it I wasn't worried at all about her, being comfortable sleeping outside, or maybe some of the more common concerns for parents who don't, use the outdoors as much. But the solo I thought might kind of get into her head, and so I thought, why even mention it? And I'm not sure, did we mention it to her at all before she
Oh,
went?
no, of course not.
Yeah, we didn't. So we just sent her
How
off,
could you? I mean, it doesn't
and
matter.
knowing that she would be perfectly fine doing it. But tell us about sort of the origin of the solo, what the goals are, why it has continued to be this feature of Outward Bound courses. I think, I mean, I don't know when it began, but I'm assuming a very long time, and why it's so important.
Yeah, well, truthfully, I don't even know when it began. I assume it's always been a part of the organization, but I should do some research on that. Um, I my first solo, so I did a dog sledding expedition and kicked my butt up one side and down the other. I was like your daughter. I had a teammate on, and I was a grown woman. So let me preface this by saying I was 35 when I did this. I was not like a kid. And I had a woman that wouldn't stop singing, and I was like, "I'm gonna murder this woman. I can't take it. We have to make this stop." And our instructors, of course, facilitated me through that and said, well, let's come up with some tools for how you can manage being around people that you find uncomfortable. Um, my solo, I remember the instructor saying to me, you can't be good company to other people if you can't be good company to yourself. And that is what has stuck with me about the solo. I think there's a lot of it's another kind of challenge, right? I mean, I, as a nearly 50-year-old woman right now, I can get myself afraid in my own house if I'm alone. Like if I start thinking about it long enough. So certainly the idea of being alone in the woods can conjure up the same sort of fear. But it happens at a point in the course where students have had enough experience. And of course, we're there, we're checking on them. We know where everybody is. Like nobody's truly, truly alone, but they have the perception of being alone. Um, by the time they do that in their course, they are ready for it. They're physically ready for it, they're mentally ready for it. The instructor knows they're not, or they are, and if they aren't, the instructor will pull them in closer and make sure that they have the support system they need. But the point is, like, independence, right? You're gonna take all these skills that you've learned, and you're gonna spend some time with yourself, and you're gonna spend time with yourself reflecting, which is not something we do a lot. I mean, how often are you ever just sitting quietly with yourself? And thinking about, what's life mean? What am I doing? Where do I want to go? We ask them to journal while they're on solo, to talk to themselves. They write a 6-month letter to themselves about where they want to be. They might goal set. There's usually some sort of a theme or a prompt that goes along with it, but it can be powerful for me.
And they spend the night by themselves, is what you're saying. Is it usually 12 hours, 18 hours? How
Depends on
long
the
is
length
this?
of the course. So if it's a long course, my course was 7 or 8 days, and so mine was overnight. If you are on a semester-long course, you might have a several-day solo. If it is a very short course, it might only be a few hours where you're just spending time alone. So it depends on the length and what you can put in. But, I mean, the perfect example for me is I was in the middle of the, Minnesota wilderness up in the Boundary Waters, and the wolves were howling. I made my fire, which I was very proud of. I got my socks off, I got them dry. I mean, I was like, "I am doing this, I'm making it happen," you know? And I remember laying down under my tarp, which I had rigged up so no snow was falling on me, got all cozy, and I laid there with my headlamp on, like, really debating, having this, like, internal mental struggle about, do I turn my headlamp off in the dark and go to sleep? And I had that sort of, "Screw it. If wolves are gonna eat me, wolves are gonna eat me, and it's not gonna matter if my
I
headlamp's
mean, that's
on,"
gonna
you
be a
know?
that's gonna be a queen's death. I mean,
But,
really, like,
you
amazing.
have that moment where you just have to be like,
Yeah.
"I'm doing it. I'm making this choice, and that's it." And I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and then slept in. It was luxurious. Um, so,
Turns out human beings have been sleeping by themselves in the wilderness for a long
yeah,
time,
Yeah,
totally.
right.
right? We really are just so greatly disconnected from this. We are, even on this podcast, we're starting to have more and more people figure out ways to, I'm gonna just put it out there, to trick humans into going out. Like maybe wearing a ruck,
Mhm.
going on a daily adventure, getting in a club. People are talking about just the reset of this. Can you talk about the experience that your students have after they leave? Because I think, ideally you're putting your kid not just to have an experience to grow into becoming a better version of themselves, or to have some experience or build some resilience. Will you just talk a little bit about what Outward Bound sees typically with students post experience? Because it is pretty profound.
It is profound, and I'll tell you that probably once a week, I get an email from someone who did an outward bound experience at some point in their life, and they say to me, "This was the moment. This was the thing that changed the trajectory of my life." And some of them, they didn't need their life changed. They were doing great as it was, but it gave them the mental clarity to say, "I wanna chase this goal. I wanna do something bigger. I want to give back to my community," whatever it is. Um, I ran into an orthopedic surgeon, strangely, not too long ago in an airport, and he told me that I happen to have on an Outward Bound logoed vest, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I did my course in, like, 1982 or whatever," and he said, "I ended up becoming a doctor," and he said, "I keep my letter to myself." He was 16 at the time. He said, "I keep my letter to myself in my bedside table, and I read it all the time. He said, "It's just such a
Wow.
powerful thing." And so I constantly talk to folks that say, "It is the thing that has helped me be successful because I learned how to work with people. I learned how to navigate challenge. I learned how to, you know, stretch myself outside my comfort zone."
Hey, if you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. That way you won't miss any of the new episodes we drop. Plus, it really helps other people find the show. So hit that follow button now and let's get back to it.
And recognize that so much of that is mental, right? So it's very profound. What we hear from alumni over and over and over is it was a life-changing course. And of course, there are some kids that are like, "I hated it. I'll never do it again." Well, that's okay. That's going to happen, right?
It's valid. It's valid.
But by and
I do
large, it's a
remember
very positive experience.
I do remember paddling Cataract Canyon in the middle of the Utah wilderness and paddling, like hiking to scout a rapid or something and passing some Outward Bound
Yep.
kids
I
who
was
were
about to
deep
say
into
that's
their
where we
experience.
paddle on Outward Bound.
Yes, deep into their experience. And they literally kind of were freaked out and they looked like ghosts. And they were like, "You guys have any chocolate?" like an illicit backwoods chocolate
Yep.
deal was happening. And we were like, "Yes, we do. We'll hide it behind this rock."
So I have a story to tell you, Ginger. I don't know if I mentioned this when we chatted before, but we sent Caroline on a 2-week course that was rafting for a week down Desolation Gray
Love
and
it.
then backpacking near Moab. And as you know, Kelly and I are longtime river people, river guides, have our own raft. And we actually just were able to grab a cancellation.
Nice.
And we actually put on a private trip, Kelly and I and our older daughter, just a little small private trip. And we caught up with
Or you were
Caroline's
2 days
trip.
behind.
We caught up with
No.
them. And it was
Was
one
she
of
like, "Oh
our
god, my parents are here"?
well, it was funny because it was didn't think we'd catch them. We knew they'd
Oh,
taken
no.
off 2 days ahead
Students
of
are
us,
the slowest.
so slow.
Slowest
So,
on the planet.
it it was a really funny experience to watch both all the kids and even the instructors, like, could not put it together, like, what? I think they're, like, saying to Caroline, like, "You know these people?" And, like, it just was really difficult for everyone to put it together because I have a feeling that scenario maybe has never happened in, like, Outward Bound
Yeah,
history where all of a
probably
sudden
not.
these parents are just, like, way out there and that, anyway, it was really great because we understood the importance of what they were doing, so, I mean, we literally stopped and we hugged it out, and we
You're
just
like,
kept going
"Deuces,
like
we'll
we
see you
were
at the
there.
end."
And it was her birthday. So we got to
It
hug her
happened
on
to
her
be her
birthday and then we
birthday,
didn't
which
have
was
anything else.
which was serendipitous. It was her birthday. We hugged it out, but I mean, we interacted with them for like 2 minutes, and we're like, "See ya," and we just
That's
kept going.
amazing.
So I had
Well,
to tell you, yeah.
when I will try to get out and see crews in the field, and if they're on the water, I always know I'll catch them, like, every single time, and even if they're on a
They were
trail,
really
I know I'll
slow.
catch them because they are just,
You're not
you
wrong.
know, they just don't move like we move. My favorite treats
Yes.
to take out there, the kids love watermelon. They love, one time I gave a group they were paddling down a river that I happened to be near, and I had a cooler full of popsicles. I mean, sugar when you haven't had sugar in 2 weeks is amazing, right?
Popsicle.
Yeah.
Oh my god, and a cold popsicle out there in that kind of
Oh, or
environment. So, anyway,
watermelons.
I
Yeah.
digress. So, I'd love to talk to you about a question that I imagine you field all the time as the CEO of Outward Bound, and that is accessibility.
Mhm.
My guess is that a lot of people assume that Outward Bound is, for like the one percenters, and that there would be no chance that they could send their kid on a course like this. And I know there's lots of different ways that Outward Bound works to make your programs much more accessible to many people. So I'm sure it's a question you get asked a lot. It's probably top of mind. How does Outward Bound address accessibility?
Totally. So, um, accessibility happens to be my sort of heart project because I have worked in a school where there's an outward bound school that's located here in Baltimore where there happens to be a lot of poverty, right? There's a lot of kids that are never going to make it to the outdoors unless there are programs like ours working with them. So there are programs in cities located all over all over the place that are about getting folks who are totally disconnected from the outdoors, figuring out how do we create a pathway for you to the outdoors. And so many of those kids, once they have the experience, are like, "Oh my God, this is for me. This is the thing I've been missing," right? We are in the midst of a major initiative right now which is like all consuming, but it is the most amazing thing I think we've done in a long time. We have an initiative called Advancing Access to the Outdoors. And what that is it's been a massive fundraising effort. We've raised a lot of money to really be able to create the systems to provide scholarships to kids all over the country. Because what I don't want is for kids to say, money's a barrier, getting access to the gear is a barrier. Like, we can remove all of those things. And so there is a phenomenal group of board members and donors and community around us that are saying, yep, we believe in this. We value this in the same way. And they're donating dollars that literally go out to kids. So anybody who is listening that is wondering, like, can I afford to get my kid on this? Absolutely talk to us about how we can do that, because we are here for it in so many ways. The whole strategy hinges on serving kids where they are locally and then getting them out there into these wild places. And it's exciting. It's really fun to see.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Take a second and define wild place for us, because I think if I just poured into a busy working family, I'm like, where am I going to put 2 weeks of adventure for my child? Which I think anyone intuitively would be like, yes, I want this for my kid. But you hinted at already that hey, maybe there's weekends and maybe we could paddle. Will you just give us a sort of depth and breadth, large brush of like when you say outward bound, what does that mean?
So,
Because I think we have an idea of what it means. What does it mean when you say
you mean physical locations? Is that what you're thinking about?
locations or time or how many days, like that sort of thing? I don't think people realize sort of the depth and breadth
Oh, yeah.
of,
So
of,
entry
of
point
courses
can
you
be
offer.
one day. You can come out and there are schools that offer hikes. There out when I say schools, I mean outward bound schools. I recognize that everybody else in the universe thinks physical schools, but I only think outward bound schools. um, so there are one day programs that could be everything from a hike or a ropes course, challenge course, right? That's a great entry point. I always joke that people would show up and realize, like, oh, these aren't a bunch of crazy hippies. I can send my kids out into the woods with them. And then it goes to 5-day programs, to 7-day programs, 10 days, all the way up to semester long programs. From a location standpoint, that could be happening in your neighborhood, right? If you're in San Francisco, there is a base camp in San Francisco um, with a ropes course right there that serves kids from all over the city. So we're trying to create local access points all over the place. And then because we're such a long-standing institution, we're lucky enough to have permits that have just been grandfathered in over the years to some of the most beautiful places in the country. I mean, just exceptional places that we can take people to have adventures. So once you get into that 5 and 7 day range, what we're talking about is expeditioning. You're going out, you're moving every day. You wake up in the morning, you break camp, you pack up, and you get moving again. We don't do a lot of base camping. And so if you're on a river, that could look like launching and you're floating 10 days down that river, camping at a different spot every night. Same thing on the Appalachian Trail or in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And then on big long courses, you could be doing everything from sailing in Maine, going to Patagonia to go backpacking, Costa Rica to scuba dive. Um, we have locations all over the place. And then when you get outside the United States, there are 36 outward bounds around the world. So it just keeps going.
Serious
Amazing.
question. What's the age limit asking for a friend?
Yeah, I know. As you're talking about this, I'm like, God, I want to go on the course.
I think
Yeah.
we see and understand intuitively the truth of taking young people, having these experiences, building resilience, and just the idea of like, well, I can survive that. I can survive anything. Is there an age
No.
range? Do people top out?
There is a floor, not a ceiling. So we generally don't take kids younger than 12. And a lot of times that's because of size, maturity, right? They haven't been away from home a lot, so that gets harder. On the top end, I actually just talked to somebody who was on a course in California, and there was a 75-year-old man on that course. And so he was climbing in Joshua
So
Tree.
cool.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot of adult courses that we call renewal courses because sometimes, I mean, let's be honest, I can handle a lot of things, but what I need is some reflection and some time to go out and find myself again in the outdoors. And so it's a little different, I think, depending on the age group that you're working with.
It's so interesting. We work deeply in this, as you know, health and wellness space. And there's been this huge rise in like wellness retreats and sometimes I think maybe some of the people who are drawn to a wellness retreat might actually get a lot more out of going on a renewal outward bound retreat, don't you think?
Yes,
I don't want to
100%.
offend anybody, but I do have a question underlying
Go
that
ahead.
though. So, as I mentioned, we are doing a lot of work in the health and wellness space, and we've sort of dipped a toe into the longevity space, which has become all the rage. Everyone's talking about longevity, but I have to think, and I don't know if you're seeing or have any thoughts on it, but that these sort of early outdoor experiences uh, create an environment where people wanna continue to move their bodies, I mean, that's one of our big missions in our own lives is just to help people figure out how to move more because we
Mhm.
know it's so critical for
Yeah, the
overall
spin bike
health.
is a terrible adventure
Yeah,
experience.
and so, what are you seeing? What's your take on, is can Outward Bound or other programs like this or just going out into the outdoors be sort of that spark that helps people wanna sort of keep a movement practice going in their life?
100%. We see that all the time. Kids get introduced to something because it's not just movement for movement's sake, right? You're actually traveling. You're moving your body over a, s- a landscape or over a river, whatever it is, and you get that sort of dopamine rush that comes with movement anyway, right? And physical activity anyway, but then also the awe that comes with being in the outdoors and being somewhere that's beautiful. And there is tons of research about what that does for the human brain. I mean, it really does bring your nervous system down. It's it's equated to a religious experience, and that's why I always talk about seeing a river wake up as a religious experience, right? Because you have this sense of awe, and when I say awe, I mean AWE, where you're like, "Oh, whoa, this is amazing." And if you got there on your own 2 feet or with your arms in a boat or whatever it is, it's even that much more amazing. And so we find that people after the courses they wanna keep doing it, right? They've had this experience, they've had the taste, and they're like, "How do I get that again?
That's
How do
right.
I make it happen again?" And even young kids, it's adorable when they're trying to get their parents to do it. So they're like, "We can do this hike, and it's gonna be easy, and we're gonna get to this top," and they get their parents out and the people around them because they now have found this gateway into something that feels really good, and something that's really good for them.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a believer. So I wanted to switch directions a little bit and talk about this crazy world of technology we live
Oh
in
boy.
and Outward Bound. So I know that you guys are doing an amazing program upcoming here that I want to talk about. But before I get to that, I do feel like, over this long I don't know what it is, 70 years that Outward Bound has been in business,
Mhm.
I have to think this introduction of technology has been one of the biggest shifts. And I'm wondering, what you've seen in terms of, is there more enrollment now because more parents are trying to create opportunities for their kids to get away from technology, or has technology actually harmed enrollment? Um, are you seeing and on actually a course like a kid by kid level basis, what are you seeing is different in kids of this generation? Because really I do feel like, Kelly and I feel as Gen X parents that like our kids have been the sort of crash test dummies of
My kids
technology.
too. Yep.
Um and that we're the crash test dummies of parents dealing with technologies. And so I guess that's maybe an overly broad question, but if you could just sort of talk about like this, it just technology piece has just changed everything. And what is your take on that from an outward bound perspective?
So I'll say I am not the expert in this. However, I am learning really quickly. And I have a lot of personal opinions, and that's what I'll share is that and I'll share we do have a public stance on it as well. So, I have 4 boys. 2 are mine, 2 are my husband's. They are all 20 to 23. And so when they were growing up, I am part of the generation that experimented on our kids, right? I mean, that's what a lot of people are referring it to. We had no research. We didn't know what it was gonna do, but we handed them screens and we handed them phones and we did all of those things, right? Jonathan Haidt, who's the author of The Anxious Generation, talks about
Amazing
yeah,
book.
it's an amazing book, and, he talks about our children meaning mine and yours, right? That generation of kids is the first generation to have a screen-based childhood rather than a play-based childhood, which is so important when you think about what skills you develop in the play yard. You're 6 years old, you're fussing over a toy, right? You're negotiating relationships with friends. There's all sorts of human interaction, interpersonal skills that you learn just from being physically present with each other. Even if you're not outdoors, just being together, you learn a lot of skills. And there are some critical points in your development that you have to learn those skills, just like speech. If you don't learn it in your normal cycle in that critical period, it's going to be harder for you to learn later on. There's now a lot of research saying, like, if kids don't learn these skills when they're supposed to at 3 and 4 and 8 and 11 of how to interact with each other, they're going to have a much harder time when they become adults in the workforce trying to navigate challenge and read, even reading facial expressions, right? And the non-physical cues that people give, folks are just going to have a harder time with it. So the way that's played out at Outward Bound is what we see right now with kids is a massive mental health epidemic. It is, we serve nearly 40,000 students a year all over the United States, which is, I mean, that's a lot of data, right? We see a lot of kids. We have a pretty good, our fingers on the pulse of what's happening out there. And kids are showing up to us stressed. We have increased rates of suicidal ideation, um, meaning, in case anybody doesn't know what that means, where a kid will express, I've been thinking about suicide. I've been thinking about this. It's crossed my mind. Like they're talking about, I've had the idea and I'm toying with it in my head. Um, they have real problems with their social interactions and with their friend groups. And I think a lot of that is related to screens. I think it's a lot to do with not having that interpersonal time, learning the skills together, and the stress relief that comes with just walking away from the data, just walking outside. Certainly technology, we're on technology right now. It's important. It's not going anywhere and it is a tool, but I
Right.
think we've got to rebalance how we interact with it and decide and be conscious about our choices and how much time we're actually spending.
Yeah, it's a big thing that we're all dealing with, and I do really believe the outdoors are a cure.
You all are working on something which I'd love to talk about, but I want to just talk about how this tech has even crept into one of our places. The summer we were on the Rogue River as a
Oh,
kind of a family trip. And one of the things that we've always valued is as soon as we're just like, 10 minutes off the highway, like no one's phone works anymore. We're like, oh, well,
Oh,
it
darn.
forces everyone.
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It forces everyone to be like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And everyone loves
Yeah.
it. Um, it's definitely funny when we come back into range to hear like the devices power back up and the dopamine hits. Um, but one of the things that we ran into was that we were talking to some guides on a professional trip on the same sort of 6-day wilderness thing, and everyone has satellite now
Mm.
and their phones. So the Groover, which is the outdoor toilet, everyone, they'd set it up in
For
their
a second there, I
classic
was like, "Did he
place
just
and
say Groover?"
Groover.
Yeah.
You don't pee in the Groover, everybody. And one of the things that happened was that there were some bees nearby the Groover that was making someone uncomfortable. And that's where the Groover goes, and you're in the wilderness, and there are bees sometimes. And this person texted back to the
The
governing body,
rafting company
the
HQ
HQ, and complained about bees in the Groover.
in real time.
And then the rafting company texted the guide and said, "Hey, what's going on?"
I'm like,
And
"Move the
Juliet and I were
Groover.
like,
Nobody wants to poop with bees, like, move
"It's
it."
true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true." But Juliet and I at that moment felt like, wow, we have crossed some Rubicon where this piece is no longer completely isolated, that we have to be much more intentional. And I think that sets up, we can't just, it's not, the environment is no longer constrained for us. And I do love being able to call in a satellite if I need, a helicopter if someone gets injured, of course. But we're having to be much more conscientious and meta, and I think that sets up what you're talking about with something called the reset. Will you tell us what that
Yeah.
is?
So the reset, we're really leaning into this. And before I talk about the reset, I will just say our courses are all device free. And I can remember a time 10 years ago, we were debating internally in the organization, like, should we continue to do that? We tell all the kids no sex, no drugs, no rock and roll. And that means a lot of things, but the rock and roll is the tech, right? And so that means when a student leaves on their Outward Bound course, they leave their phone behind. They don't bring it with them. We do have a satellite phone out on the courses if there's an emergency, but that's tucked away and the instructors are the ones that have access to it, you know? So I think it's an important decision that we made when we said, "Nope, this is important. It's important to who we are. It's important to the experience." And so it's one of the things that we hear from parents all the time now that it's one of the reasons they chose Outward Bound. Yes, we do amazing things, but we're the one imposing the device-free rule, and saying, "Nope, no phones allowed. That's not how we do here." So we're in the middle of launching a big national movement called the Reset. And it's got started from conversations just like this, right? It was me talking to some of my board members, talking to donors, talking to folks out there, talking to other parents who are saying, I'm really worried about this. I'm worried about what I'm seeing with my kids. Um, and I think people feel pretty helpless. They feel pretty powerless. They don't know what to do. Parents are really worried and asking all the time, like, what, how do I put the boundaries in place? What do I do? And it's tricky. It's different for every family. There's not a one size fits all. But I think the reset is the way that we decided to say, we can collectively lean into a moment and make a choice to put our phones down and not think about it in terms of what we're giving up, but in terms of what we're getting back. So by setting your devices down and taking a pledge to say, I'm going to take an hour away and I'm going to go do something for me outside is a powerful stance to take. It's even more powerful if it's 24 hours. And so we're encouraging people on January 24th to join us. Get on the website right now and take the pledge and tell us how much time you're going to step away from your phones. Outward Bound alone last year got kids off devices for 1.4 million hours, which is a lot of time, right? And huge. And so what we want to know is what could we do if we all collectively counted those hours, counted that time up together? We all pledged how many hours can we reach and what good could we do for our communities or for ourselves if we weren't attached to a screen for just a hot minute, not forever, just a
Right,
second.
right, right. Living in reality. Well, we of course will link to the reset page, but it's outwardbound.org/reset if anybody, or the sorry, /the reset if anybody just wants to type it in while they're listening to this. Question that I know people have, I could look it up on my calendar. Is that a weekday or a weekend?
It is a weekday and
Yeah,
I think it's a Wednesday.
yeah. Okay. And then is Outward Bound partnering with other organizations like schools or, because I mean, I sometimes struggle with, sometimes our holidays as a country because we sort of technically are celebrating something like a historical figure, but, or veterans, but we don't really do anything, to support those things. And so I personally think having a National Technology Free Day would go a long way towards, supporting people's mental health and getting people outdoors. And I don't, I'm not optimistic that's going to happen necessarily. But what are you guys
I'm like, you just
doing
sparked an
to try
idea.
to
I'm going to try to
promote
make it
this?
happen now.
Yeah. What are you doing to try to sort of expand the reach of the reset? Obviously, being on this podcast, one of those
Yep.
things. But are you working with schools or organizations or corporations, or how are you trying to expand the reach here?
All of the above. All of those things.
Okay.
So there is a support coalition. If you go on the website, you can see that, and that's where your business, your organization can sign up as a group and say, "Hey, I'm in support of this." I saw this morning, I didn't even know this, but Blue Star Families is now supporting the reset, and their whole organization is taking the pledge. So the organizations that we work closely with, we work with a lot of veterans organizations, a lot of schools, a lot of youth serving organizations. They are all taking the pledge and they're joining the coalition to spread the word and say, hey, we're all going to take a break. We're all going to take a break and we're going to step off on this one day and, do something for ourselves. So it's been super fun because we're getting momentum and I have folks calling me and saying like, how do I do this? What are you doing? My staff told me you're doing this cool thing. And so, yeah, we've got sort of this grassroots effort that's happening. And, it's been fun because when we cooked up this idea, we're like, do we think anybody's going to jump on board? And people are. I mean, again, it's something we're all worried about. It just crosses every line you can think of. Everybody is thinking about this right now.
And I just want to say, as a parent, having sent a, digital child off into a 2-week Outward Bound course. I think she was 14 when she did it, or was she 15, 14, 15? I mean, honestly, just the time away from the phone is worth the price of admission. I mean, I am a longtime outdoor lover. It was involved in outdoor education in my 20s. Like, I get it. I get all the things that are amazing. But, in this particular moment as a parent, just being able to send my kid to have an awesome, completely phone-free experience was, I mean, worth it times 10.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and we even train our instructors on it now. We tell them, "Just assume everybody's coming with some sort of withdrawal," right? And usually it's tech withdrawal.
Yeah.
And so the first few days is like, "Okay, you're gonna be fine." People I actually talked to somebody the other day that said it was one of our staff that went out on our course. It was her first outward bound expedition, and she said it took 3 days for her to stop feeling the phantom buzzing in her pocket. And she's
Oh,
like, "I didn't even have the
yeah.
phone, but I kept feeling, like, the alert from my phone that I had a message or a text or something." And, we hear from kids all the time that afterwards, they're like, "Oh, I feel free." Like, it feels like a weight has been lifted, and they don't always wanna rush right back into their phones. And, I think that's the hope for us in the reset is to just start these conversations, get people talking about it and thinking about ways that like, technology is here to stay. We're not getting rid of it, but how do we find balance?
No. Yeah, I mean, the reset is such a great idea, and, is this something that our band is planning on doing annually? Or are you gonna sort of I realize this is the first year, you're gonna see how it goes, see how you can expand it, but are you gonna try to make this a thing?
I think we're gonna try to make it a thing. I was recently at an Outward Bound international meeting in South Africa and meeting with Outward Bound Croatia and Outward Bound South Africa and Outward Bound Germany and they were all like, "How do we do this in our countries? Let's do this," which was super exciting. And I said, "Well, let us figure this out this year. This will be the first one, and then I'd like to roll it out." And we just keep hearing that from everybody. It's like, "Yes, let's lean into this. Let's keep this conversation and really start a movement."
You're saying that Croatian teenage brains are the same?
Yes.
It's
Like that?
shocking.
Um, okay, so before we've got a couple questions
Yep.
to ask before we let you go for today, but we've had nature researchers and nature app. We've had so many people on this podcast encouraging people to get out into nature, and Kelly and I really value that
Yeah,
on
I
a
mean,
myriad of levels.
our personal motto is have a body built for adventure.
Yeah, that's our personal
Ooh, I
motto.
love
But
that.
for someone who is listening to this and but isn't sure where to begin, what would be something you could recommend they could do today or look forward to doing this weekend that sort of captures the spirit of Outward Bound without actually going on an
That's a
Outward Bound
good
course?
question. My easy answer is always go for a walk. Like,
Mm.
I eat my lunch on the stoop of my the front stoop. Every day, I take my lunch and I just go sit out there and eat, and there's something about having the sun shine on my face, right? It automatically changes my perspective, changes my state of mind. Like, I just feel different when I've been outdoors. And so I think you can start as small as that, and then I would say just go for a wander. Not even a power walk. Like, I am not kidding with you. I love to just wander. And that can be a really great way to just get a little taste of it, and I guarantee once you do that, you're gonna wanna do it again and again and more and more and more, and there are so many good places to help folks figure out how to get out there.
I love it. Okay, so we started a new tradition on the Ready State podcast called the Infinite Shelf, and you are our second guest getting this question. So, uh, give us a book, show, film, music to add to our Infinite Shelf, and why.
Okay. I'm gonna give you 2 because I feel like I have to,
Yes,
and I've been thinking
please.
about this. So, The Anxious Generation is the one that I would say you have to read because that's really gonna give you some insight into what's happening in the teenage mind, why this is so important, why disconnecting is really important for our kids. So, I think Jonathan Haidt wrote it. He's got another book coming out. He's actually involved with the reset and supporting us in this, so I would love to give him a plug. Definitely read that book. The other one is one that folks haven't heard of, and it is a personal favorite of mine that I go back to all the time, and I recommend to everybody. It's a book called Trace by Lorette Savoy, who's an African American author, and she traces her family's history through the United States by the land. And it is so beautifully written. She talks about, where they were 100 years ago in Texas and what that meant, what the land meant to their family. So it's not as much about the family and the people themselves, although it is, but the way she weaves the stories of the places and the land and the rivers and the forests and the trails and the history of the land into her family's history is just stunningly beautiful.
I love it. Sold. I'm definitely reading
It's
that.
worth
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for both those recommendations. And yes, I haven't read Trace, but I will. And I also, Kelly and I share your strong recommendation for reading Anxious Generation. It's so important.
Absolutely. And I just want to, on behalf of a generation of people who had outward bound like experiences, my elementary school did this in the 7th grade, and we spent, 10 days in the Austrian border, being very cold and swimming and having to cook for each other. I'm pretty sure it kept me out of trouble.
I'd
It
100%
allowed it allowed it I found my friends, I found my friends, and I learned to kayak early. I ended up meeting this one, and I can basically trace my entire success as an adult and being I'm gonna just put in quotation marks, decent person, because you're not married to me, but it all starts with sleeping in a tent under the stars,
Mhm.
and I'm so grateful for you to continue to carry this idea and this powerful, powerful tool. And thanks for letting everyone know about where they can go and begin to have these experiences for themselves and for their families.
Thank you so much. I mean, it is an honor to be able to carry this. I truly feel like this was a calling for me in life, and I am tickled pink that I get to wake up every day and do this.
And before we let you go, where can we will obviously link to information about the reset and be sharing that far and wide on all of our platforms. But where can people learn more about Outward Bound to sign up their kid or support the organization's mission or otherwise?
www.outwardbound.org. It's the easiest, fastest way,
Perfect.
and we have a brand new, fresh website, so it's nice,
Woo.
beautiful, and easy to navigate.
Amazing.
Love
Most
it. Well,
important thing.
Ginger, yeah, most important thing, Ginger, really thankful for you being here today. It's, again, as I said, being in the outdoors is so near and dear to our hearts, and we really think was the foundation of who we are as people. So thank you so much for being here and telling us about your story.
You're very welcome. You guys are my people. I mean, this is my community. I love talking to them.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Kelly and Juliet here. If you're ready to feel strong, move freely, and build a body that lasts for life, we've got something special for you. The STARAT system, our 12-week strength and lifestyle training program.
We designed it so you don't have to guess what works anymore. We build strength, mobility, nutrition, and recovery into one smart system that actually sticks. Over 12 weeks, you'll train with us and learn from our expert guests, build strength, lose the stiffness, wake up with more energy, and actually finally feel in control of your body again.
If that sounds like your kind of move, go to thereadystate.com/system to learn more and enroll. We'd love to help you show up stronger, more capable, and ready for anything life throws at you. Let's make it happen. We'll see you inside.